Good evening, Santa Ana parents. I am Mr. Barber. You are watching my pre-recorded message to you for back to school night. I'm sorry I cannot be there live, but let's go ahead and hopefully this brief video will be able to give you a good idea about how we are going to be covering classes in this distance learning situation. I'm going to go in there. All right, so if you're the parent of a sophomore, your students will be learning about the events that have shaped the world over the last 400 years. We are going to be working on and establishing the key events and people that have helped shape our modern world into the 21st century. And if you're the parent of a senior, your students are going to learn how to navigate the government policies and the economic theory that has been woven together into our modern complex world. Now, all of your students are going to be learning skills in reading, writing, discourse, critical thinking, all of the core tools that they're going to need to be successful in jobs in the future. These are the basics of social studies. Social studies is the study of people and society. We're going to be doing a lot of reading. In my class, they will most certainly be doing a lot of writing. I assign more essays than most teachers. We will be attempting discourse, although I understand that's difficult in distance learning. And of course, I will be demanding that they critically think about the causes and effects of everything they learn in their classes. Now, for the sophomores, the specific events that they'll be learning, just in case you want to be, hey, what did you learn in school today? Well, you'll know roughly where they're going. We're going to be talking about the Enlightenment and how Europe emerges from absolutist rule by kings and emperors, and the occasional queen and empress, of course, and how this directly tracks into the French Revolution, the rise of Napoleon, and how in the aftermath of an early kind of, let's call it a beta test for a world war, we see the rise of nationalism, we see the industrialization in Europe, the age of imperialism, where Europe becomes the dominant force in the world for the first true time, and how all of this will eventually lead us to arguably one of the most important turning points in history of the last few centuries, World War I, an event that we can see centuries leading up to, and in the 100 years since, we still feel its repercussions in the Russian Revolution and how that has left the country to this day. The rise of fascism, something that we once thought gone and yet somehow is still a thing in the 21st century. World War II and its consequences. The Cold War that maybe isn't as gone as we thought it was in the 90s. And of course, how all of this has shaped the turn of the millennium and the century to which your children were born. So some of the themes that your sophomores will be learning about is we're going to look at things like change and continuity, how societies and people and cultures and just the human race in general is changed over time, but how it also remains fundamentally the same. We'll look at the rise of two phenomena of the last 2 centuries, Westernization and democratization, how Western culture came to dominate the last couple centuries. And finally, the effects of modernization, both the positive and the negative, not just the ones that have happened, but the ones that are still happening and that we are now concerned about into the future. Why all this matters, of course, for your history students is that they're going to learn how today's news is not an isolated thing, but rather it is the result of yesterday's history. For your seniors, we're going to be looking at specific topics in economics like opportunity costs, the foundational question of what do you do with your resources, i.e. money and time. We're going to look at the economic systems that they are familiar with and the ones that are used in other parts of the world. We're going to look at 2 of the principal forces on choices, supply and demand. We're going to establish how pricing works so that your students will understand why things cost the things why objects and services and items cost what they do when they are functioning in the real world. We're going to look at business and banking, 2 aspects of the economy that your children will most assuredly have to interact with. We will look at taxes and, the thing that we all have to deal with. And finally, we will look at personal financing, arguably one of the most important topics for your students. We will look at government in second semester. We are going to be looking at relatively few core topics, but of course there's going to be a lot to unpack there. We're going to look at the origins of the American government, what the founding principles were, both the ones that have been realized and the ones that have been idealized, but maybe not exercised. We're going to look at the composition of the Constitution, the thing that everybody claims they've read, but very few people actually understand. We'll look at the three branches of government and how they function with and or against each other. We'll look at how laws are written and implemented. And two topics that are of particularly dear importance to me is we will be discussing how much local government matters, something that many people don't realize. And lastly, of course, we'll talk about voting. Now, seniors, your students will be doing economics this first semester during the 2020 election. However, I will still be addressing voting in small amounts, just to make sure that they understand their rights and the importance of it, both for themselves and for family members and those people they know that can vote. All right. Now, the coursework for everybody during online learning. So this is very modified from how I usually run a class. Everything is going to be grouped in weekly subunits. So we might be doing a unit like, say, supply and demand for 2 or 3 weeks, but each week we'll have a subunit like supply, demand, and then equilibrium. So we break it down in weekly groups. This is how I've always done it, and we'll continue to do it during distance learning. On average, I assign about 1 assignment per day. So some might take 2 days. Sometimes I might assign 2 in a single day, but essentially your students can expect to do about 5 assignments per week. Now, I know that sounds like a lot with block schedule, but remember with block schedule, it's essentially 2 classes in a day. Their work is going to be made up of a combination of reading, worksheets and notes, essays. All my classes do 6 essays a year. That's 1 every 6-week grading period. Projects and tests. Projects are usually, I like to do group ones, but obviously I will be modifying them for the duration of distance learning. Generally speaking, my policy is that kids should be able to finish most of the work in class. I do not like to give a lot of homework. I didn't like it when I was their age. I don't see why they should like it. And I am also adjusting the schedule so that they have time on the weekend to finish. So, during online learning, your students will be assigned their work starting on Monday, and even those classes that don't have block schedule on Monday, most weeks, assuming that something has not gone wrong or that, the insanity and chaos that is this pandemic is not interfering, every class should have their schedules posted on Monday, and then all classes will have until Sunday to turn in their completed work. And right now, we'll be turning everything in digitally through either Google Classroom or their specific e-textbook websites. That's Pearson for seniors, and McGraw-Hill for sophomores. Now, tips for parents. This is a slightly modified version of what I always recommend. The big one is, guys, because of assigned work, please try to make sure your students have as much quiet time as reasonably possible. Many of your students have already gotten, I imagine, a couple of laughs at my expense. As you can kind of see behind me, I'm actually in a transitional moving stage right now because I am going from one house to another. So I am stuck in a small space with a very energetic toddler who enjoys interrupting my classes. So I understand, and the key word is reasonable. I understand that for many students, they're not always going to be able to find a quiet place to work. I just ask that we all try as much as possible to help each other out and be patient with each other in this case. I do always recommend, regardless of whether there's a pandemic, that parents please encourage reading time with your kids. Please encourage that if they're reading, they can do it as long as they want. If they're up at 2 a.m. on their cell phone, yell at them, take the phone away. But if they're up at 2 a.m. reading, they probably still shouldn't be up at 2 a.m. with reading. But maybe, be a little more lenient about it. And I'm a big advocate. I also used to teach English. Of anything is good reading, whether it's a novel, whether it's a hobby magazine, comic books, I don't care. As long as they're reading, it's good for them. Reading is like doing, physical exercises for your brain. It helps keep it in shape. This is a big one, especially for senior parents. Please discuss local and world news together. When you guys look online and see the news, or you watch the evening news, or you read it in the newspaper, because those are still a thing, I'm told, please make sure that you discuss it with your students. Start bringing them in. They can't learn how to talk and discuss adult things unless they get the practice. And one day, they are going to have to know these things because they affect them. Whether or not you know something's happening, it still affects you. And I always encourage the students that they should know what's going on. And I ask that you help with that. Tutoring during online learning. So I have office hours posted in Google Classroom. It is Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday from 8 to 8:30 a.m. and 1:50 to 2:45 p.m. Now, tutoring is best scheduled ahead of time. I try to have my office hours just on live in case kids want to drop in, but that is not always possible just because of other work I'm trying to do. If I'm grading, or if I'm in a meeting, or if I'm doing some other form of contact, it's not always possible. So trying to scheduling some tutoring time ahead is best. And again, I also used to teach English both at the high school and middle school level, so I can provide tutoring assistance for that as well. My best contact information is this email. Phone conferences are simply not going to be available during the pandemic. Email, I will respond within 24 hours if I receive the email between Monday and Thursday. If I get it late Friday night or Saturday, Sunday, I will not be seeing it until Monday. Weekends for me, Friday night and weekends for me are family time. Any other time, though, I check my email a good solid dozen times a day. So if you have any further questions, feel free to email them to me, or you can use the Parent Square to respond to messages, or you can have your students relay them to me directly through our live class sessions. Have a good night, and good luck.